Dwayne Haskins Pro Day today. He's meeting with people. He's talking about teams. We'll see what John McMullen has to say about all that here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotlines. He joins us each and every day. And don't forget about all of his work at 97.3 ESPN.com. John, how are you doing on this Wednesday?
Doing well. How are you, Josh?
I'm doing well. I think we are both doing better than the majority of the Philadelphia area who is panicking about the Sixers game tonight, or they're upset about Temple losing last night. So,
well, yeah, I mean, you weren't going to make a deep run, so we kind of knew that going in. So I don't know how worried you can get about that. And it's still the regular season, so you can't get too amped.
Right, exactly.
About the Sixers. Yeah. So everybody settle down. Everything will be fine, especially with the Sixers.
Where's Aaron Rodgers when we need him? Is there RELAX, right?
Yeah, exactly. Must learn from Aaron Rodgers.
John, I wanted to start.
Everybody needs to relax.
Ain't that the truth? John, I wanted to start with Dwayne Haskins because he has some interesting comments. The reports were coming out before his pro day. Even he's already met with the Giants. Going to have another meeting with them later. According to Adam Schefter, the team is going to meet with the Raiders, the Dolphins, the Redskins, the Broncos, and the Giants ahead of the draft. He made an interesting comment today. He said the NFL Network that he had an awesome meeting. Those were his words with the Giants. So how serious do you think the Giants are about Dwayne Haskins?
I think they're very serious. I think they have to be serious. I think Dave Gettleman understands no matter what he says, and I think I always say this to Mike when he's there. I don't know why people look at general managers and personnel decision makers around this league, and when they say something, they act like they're under oath. I mean, there's a lot of subterfuge going on. As best evidenced by Gettleman saying he's not going to trade Odell Beckham, and then what he did, he traded him. So, I mean, he knows he needs a quarterback, and he knows he needs the heir apparent to Eli Manning sooner rather than later. The only question is, how much do they like Dwayne Haskins, and can they get him? Because that's going to be the first quarterback taken. And as we've seen in recent years, you generally got to go up to get quarterbacks because everybody's aware of the teams that need quarterbacks, the teams that are thinking about going after quarterbacks. So there's going to be somebody who sees the Giants there at number 6 and sees Haskins, and they're going to go up to 5 or 4 or 3 to go get them. And so the Giants have to be well aware of that. And it all comes down to evaluation. You have to like the prospect. We all understand that, but you also can't get into this wait mode and say, well, I'm not in love with this guy. Let's wait till next year. Sometimes you got to sit on the pot or you know what, and it's time for the Giants to get a quarterback.
Yeah, and Gettleman did come out and say that they really like the Kansas City model, as he called it, the whole starting Alex Smith for a year, Mahomes sitting behind him, and then Mahomes getting to start the next year. So, and do you think that's kind of where the Giants' thinking is we need a quarterback to sit behind Eli for a year and then put him in the starting job next year?
Yeah, I mean, that's not even the Kansas City model. That's been a model used in this league for a very, very long time. Obviously, the problem is, and I talk about this all the time, when quarterbacks really get taken anywhere in the top 10, certainly first overall, even more so. But they're generally going to bad teams, number one. They're generally going to situations that have at best bridge quarterbacks. So the pressure to get that young quarterback on the field increases. So you can have the best laid plans. The key with Kansas City, they were a really good football team with Alex Smith. So they weren't forced. There wasn't that pressure to play Patrick Mahomes as quickly as some other young quarterbacks. And the New York Giants aren't the Chiefs. They're not going to be successful with Eli Manning. So if you take a Haskins at 6, you're going to go into the season with that plan, but that plan's going to last 4 to 6 weeks would be my prediction.
Speaking of plan, John, could that first-round pick the Giants got from the Browns be a backup plan in terms of if a team tries to jump the Giants at 6, could the Giants use their 2 first-round picks now, the one from Cleveland and their own at 6, to move up into the top 4 to possibly get Haskins?
Yeah, no question. I think that was a big part of it, and that's what I just said about teams are aware, and you generally have to move up to go get the quarterback you want. So they'll definitely be monitoring the situation, and if they do like him, they might have to go up and get him. They now have the capital to do so. The best case scenario, obviously, would be to get them just where they are, but you can't count on that. And we've seen it time and time again. Unless you're number 1 overall, you can't guarantee anything.
John, we know about Haskins, we know about Murray, but who do you think is going to be the 3rd quarterback taken in the draft? We know the reports the Broncos are going to meet with Drew Lock. We know Daniel Jones is a guy that people like to directly and indirectly suggest for the Patriots for him to be a development guy behind Tom Brady. We know that Will Grier, there's a lot of conflicting opinions about him. Some people think that he's going to be a great NFL quarterback. Some people think he's going to be a total bust. Who do you think is going to be the 3rd quarterback of the 2019 draft?
I do think it is likely to be Locke. You keep hearing John Elway likes him. That's been going on for a while around the league, and they seem really, really interested. And obviously, even though they traded for Joe Flacco, that's not a long-term solution. So they do have to get a younger quarterback in there. I think that's a possibility. And then you mentioned Jones. You talk about the Redskins. They've got a bridge quarterback situation as well with Case Keenum and Colt McCoy. I don't think they can count on Alex Smith after that devastating injury at this stage of his career. So they need a quarterback. He could be in play there. And then you mentioned Murray. Obviously, and I think he's going number 1 overall. So that kind of takes him off the board rather quickly. But I'll tell you what, if Arizona doesn't pick him, I'm not sure where he goes. Because I'm not sure the Giants or would like him better than Haskins. Most teams in this league will look at him and look at his size and say, he's probably not the type of fit we want at the position. So that can be an Aaron Rodgers situation where if he doesn't go number 1, he might start falling to the 20s. I could see that.
Well, John, if he falls like Aaron Rodgers did, he could fall into a great situation because we've seen numerous times that the quarterbacks who do fall, like you mentioned, Rodgers, sometimes a team looks around and says, we can't let this guy go past us. So, is it possible that if he does drop, who do you think would be a team later in the draft would be ideal to make, that Packers-esque decision to say, we can't let this guy get past us?
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to see that type of situation for what I just said. I mean, generally, when you have a good quarterback situation, and you're choosing just because it's the best player available, and you're thinking maybe even 2-3 years down the road, I do think you look for a specific trait or traits that you want in your offense. And he's such a unique player. I know a lot of people are going to take this as criticism. It's not criticism. Kyler's such a unique player. I don't think there's a lot of offenses in this league equipped to use him properly. So I think you have to find guys who are open-minded enough to know that this isn't about your system. You gotta sort of develop an offense around the traits of the player. And I don't think there's a lot of coaches like that in the NFL, to be honest. They say it, they talk a good game, But we've seen it time and time again. It's about system over talent. I don't necessarily agree with that. So I don't see a ton of fits, and that's why it's lucky that Cliff Kingsbury is going to be the coach of the Cardinals, and he's going to push for him. And I do think he's going to go number one overall.
John McMullen joins the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen. John, earlier today, Benjamin Albright, he covers the NFL and the NFL draft, was on with Deshaun Hendricks, and he said that if Josh Rosen is available, that he thinks there will be a lot of teams calling about Rosen. He said if Rosen was in this year's draft class, that he would be the number one quarterback taken. So if Rosen is available, how do you think that affects Dwayne Haskins, where he goes as well? Because if we know there's other teams looking at Haskins, could Rosen's availability say to a team like the Giants, like the Redskins, or the Dolphins, maybe we change course and go get him instead of trying to draft a kid?
Yeah, well, it could be certainly a route to go for teams that we just discussed that need a quarterback, and they wouldn't have to use as high profile an asset to get him at this point, which is why it's so laughable from the Cardinal standpoint, what they're trying to do, essentially buying high and selling low. So if you can get Josh Rosen for a second or third round pick, and say you're the New York Giants, and then all of a sudden you have 2 first-round picks, you can go get an edge rusher, you can go get a right tackle, and then you're really cooking with gas, and you might be ready to be far more competitive than anyone thinks as we sit here today. The Redskins, the Dolphins, all those situations where you need a young quarterback, and I've said it. I said it a couple of weeks ago. I said everybody in this league should be interested in Josh Rosen because it's a cost-effective deal. Even if he's going to be a backup, it's a really talented guy. Now, certain situations, Tennessee now with bringing Ryan Tannehill in to back up Marcus Mariota, they're not going to look in that direction. The Rams bringing in Blake Bortles to back up Jared Goff are not going to look in that situation. But from a talent standpoint, you're not going to get a better backup quarterback than Josh Rosen. So as I said, every team should be interested. I think a lot of teams will be interested. But the teams willing to go the highest, well, are those teams you just mentioned and those teams that are in desperate need of quarterbacks. And it generally comes down to who you like. Do you like Josh Rosen better than Dwayne Haskins? A lot of it is, look at John Dorsey. Most people had Sam Darnold rated as the number one quarterback in last year's draft. John liked Baker Mayfield. That's why he picked him. So it comes down to what prospect you like the most. But, yeah, you can make an argument that Josh Rosen is better than any of the quarterbacks in this draft, and I think you can make a strong argument to say that.
Josh Hennig here, filling in for Mike Gill on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. John McMullen joins us like he does every day on the Boardwalk Honda hotline to talk NFL. John, a little bit of news around the league right now. Let's check in on LeVeon Bell. He said in an interview that the Steelers don't treat you like a human. John, to me, it sounds like the sour grapes of a guy who realizes he missed out on a bunch of money.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. He did not get what he was expecting to get, and he spin from his camp or people that have been supportive of his camp are just lying to you, to be blatantly honest. He expected much more. And there is some sour grapes toward the organization. But if you think about some of the things he said and things like Mike Tomlin told him as a rookie to kind of shut up and run the play. Well, guess what? Where are we in this league? I know we live in a politically correct society, but if you're a rookie in this league and you start saying, you know what, I want to run this, I want to run that, you know what the coach is going to tell you? He's going to tell you to shut up and run the play.
Right.
That's not surprising at all. Now, as you go further in his career, he developed into a star. You would think he'd have more input into the offense, and he probably did. But, yeah, I mean, anytime you have a divorce, you have two sides. You see things completely differently, and obviously he was not happy at the end there, and you got to blame it on somebody. That's just the way life is.
Reports are, John, Robert Kraft, the prosecution's offer is a non-starter for him. He will not accept the prosecution's offer of him pleading guilty to anything. Do you think this is just some legal hardball going on, or do you think Kraft actually has a case?
Well, that's difficult to tell without seeing the evidence. I mean, if what is reported is true and there's video, it's going to be a difficult time for him. But, I mean, at this stage for him, it's more of an embarrassment than anything else. He's not facing significant charges. I mean, right. If you remember when that story broke, everybody was talking about human trafficking and these horrible stories and people essentially being held hostage, and none of that turned out to be true. It's just your run-of-the-mill prostitution charge. Nobody in the entire case is getting charged with human trafficking, so that part of it was not correct. And then you start talking about, from a league perspective, if Robert Kraft admits to certain things, he's obviously going to be suspended. Maybe he doesn't want that part of it. So maybe he's willing to fight because it's only going to be a misdemeanor. But, yeah, if they have him on videotape doing certain things, it's going to be difficult for him.
You know, John, with the NFL suspending Kareem Hunt for 8 games, what kind of punishment do you think Kraft will get? I remember when Jim Irsay had his off the field fiasco. They basically banned him from the organization for a while. So, do you think that he could get a Irsay type suspension? Do you think this would be maybe a team activities suspension? What kind of punishment do you think the NFL would give Kraft?
I do think it would be the Irsay type suspension. That would be the template. There's also going to be a fine, most likely, which is topped out at $500,000. They can't go higher than that, so I assume it will be that. And then a lot of it is with the NFL, as we know, it's more than substance. It's about how it plays in the public, and that's what the PR point of it comes into, and probably what Robert Kraft is taking into account, because if he admits to certain things, looks bad to the public, that causes the NFL to act more quickly, maybe even more harshly. But I do think the Irsay suspension is a good template. Certainly you'll see that $500,000 fine, I would imagine, which is pretty significant, but you have to do something. So I don't think the NFL is in a good situation from either standpoint. The fact that, as we've seen really throughout Roger Goodell's recent history, really since Ray Rice, you sort of have whatever he decides. You have one camp on one side, the other camp, and nobody agrees with it. And I've talked about it a lot because the commissioner lacks credibility. So that's just where we are. No matter what decision he makes, you're going to have a whole bunch of people who disagree with it.
John, Ian O'Connor documented in his book Belichick, and I've interviewed Ian a couple of times about the book, about the fact that, Robert Kraft he's in a very interesting position at this point in his ownership of the Patriots, because he was a major broker in getting Goodell to where he is, and helping him become the commissioner and how powerful he is now. And then the whole situation with things like Spygate and Deflategate, seem to have strained that relationship. And while they're both adults, we're not talking about children on a playground, but is there a part of Goodell that looks at Kraft and says, I gotta balance between this guy being somebody who helped me get to where I am versus me also being responsible to the rest of the owners in this league?
Yeah, and I think the latter part of that is the more important part. I don't know if it's as fractured as people make it out to be. I think there's two elements of it, and I think there is the public face of it, and then the private part. And I think the public part is more acrimonious than the private part because both sides have a role to play, and it's sort of wink, wink, let's fight in public, and then behind the scenes, we're friends again. I think you have certainly some of that going on. I think people kind of forget Roger Goodell in his job description, and I've always called it as a lightning rod. Remember, the real power in this league rests with the 32 owners. They're essentially his boss, and he's there to take the public criticism they don't want to take. So a lot of it has to do with how the owners line up. And when you talk about things like Spygate, Deflategate, and probably not probably, when you look at Deflategate, more had to do with the other owners saying, you know what, we kind of brushed Spygate under the rug because the Patriots weren't the first team to do things like that. They're not going to be the last team. That's what this league is. If you're not cheating, you're not trying, all that kind of stuff. And then to boldly do something like that, or the allegation that they boldly did something like that again, a lot of the other owners said, you got to do something. And that's where Roger Goodell sort of came down with, and it depends on how the owners line up. I mean, there's no more powerful owner in this league than Jerry Jones. And look at what Goodell has had to deal with Jerry Jones. And he's still suspended Ezekiel Elliott, and he's still done things that are what you would think would be counterintuitive to making the most powerful owner in the sport happy. But the other owners were behind Goodell. So that's kind of where he goes. Wherever the owners feel, the majority of owners, that's the way he's going to go.
Follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen for all your Eagles and NFL coverage. He writes for 97.3 ESPN.com. John, I won't get to speak to you for the next couple of days. We got the NCAA tournament. So do you have any advice or picks for the audience with the tournament?
I am not your expert. As I said to Mike Gill, who's running a pool, I think I've watched about 2 hours of college basketball this entire season. I just don't have time to watch it anymore. So I'm not your expert on college basketball. So I go default, and it's going to be, let's face it, it's going to be Duke or North Carolina. Well, who's going to win the tournament?
Well, according to ESPN, the largest number of matchups, the most people who have brackets on ESPN.com have Duke versus North Carolina. So I don't think you're alone in that.
Exactly. Well, you just go. If you've watched 2 hours of college basketball like me this year, you go Duke, North Carolina. And guess what? You're going to be in better shape than people that have watched every single week of the year. Multiple games, going to be Duke and Carolina.
All right, John. Well, enjoy the next couple of days, and we'll catch up with you Monday.
All right. Thanks, Josh. Enjoy the tournament.